attention, please. Thank you so much. So we're going to continue. Let me bring you back. So hopefully that was of some value to you and your team. Obviously, this is the stuff that you guys are trying to do within your school, right? What we'd like to take an opportunity to do now is Diana and her team are going to model with some of Diana's team, taking an ELA item, a math item, and a science item, and then kind of modeling and talking out loud about the item and the data, okay? So this is just kind of, modeling for you the way this could be done, okay? So go ahead, Kristen Rulinson.
Good morning. And Paula is going to drive for me in student item analysis. So I'm just going to model one possible way that this could look in a PLC with your teachers with one specific standard. So we're going to highlight RI 3.8. Did you already click on RI 3.8? Okay, so Paula already clicked on RI 3.8, and we're going to start looking at question 30. This is a two-part question. It's an evidence select-based response. So we're going to look at question 30. She's going to click on that play button, and that brings you right to the assessment if they don't have the assessment in front of you. For ELA, it's going to show you the passage. One thing that's really important, too, is that the teachers have read the passage, because I heard some of you having conversations around the DOK levels, and is that answer right there, or do they have to make more of an inference? So we would take time to read through the passage if we haven't already. And then at the bottom, you will see, and this is two passages. Now at the bottom, you'll see the actual question. So here's question 30, part A. How does the author of selection 2 connect the ideas among the paragraphs in the section, the stars? So then I'm going to look at my student item analysis and my students, and I'm going to look at how many students got it correct. And now the kids that didn't get it correct, which answer did they select? And now go here to the distractor analysis to really look at, am I seeing a pattern? Did most of the kids that didn't get this right, did they select A? And why did they select A? Or sorry, A is the right answer. Did they select B? Okay. Did they select D? It's going to give you an idea. If you look at why did they select that, that's also going to give you a deeper understanding of if they selected B, then they really don't understand cause and effect relationships or compare and contrast text structures, right? So those are two different text structures. They don't understand either, so I need to probably reteach and support both. All right, so that's the first part. And Paula, can you show them where they can see how many students got that question correct? So on this specific question, you'll see, where is it? Was it 52.9% of the students got this correct, okay? So that's half. I really like to spend time with teachers looking at any of these two-part questions, because you need to remember on our diagnostic, each one counts as one correct answer. However, on FSA, if they get one question right and one wrong, they got that whole part wrong. So right here, with just question 30, we have 52.9% of our students got it right. That's half. But now what happens when they have to get to part 2? How many students were able to support it with evidence from the text? Right? And that's a third now. We're down a third, and that's a third if they got the first part right. So you really want to look across, like this student got both parts right. Okay, over here, here's the third. This student got D right, but he didn't get B right. So both of those would be marked wrong. And that would be one question. Let's look at 32. 31, same thing. I would bring them into that question. Scroll down. They don't need to read that passage. They already read the passage. Go down, look at the item distractor analysis. And then this is going to help explain why they might have selected that answer or not. So another thing to keep in mind with ELA, Paula, can you bring me back into the slides, please? Is not only do you need to be looking at the standards and the DOK levels, but you also need to be looking at some other things such as, can you go to the next slide? And by the way, that was a DOK level 3 question, both of those. Okay, so that's another thing you can look at through the student item analysis report. Are you seeing a pattern that students are having a more difficult time with DOK 3? But here's some other lenses, which I know we're familiar with, but just to remind you to work on with your teachers. Next slide. Is things to consider beyond standard and DOK. One is text complexity. So you already know your students that are significantly below grade level, and they're probably getting a lot of questions wrong across because they're below grade level. But you also want to think about text complexity with kids that are on grade level and getting a lot of questions right. Are you noticing a pattern that in certain passages, they're getting more questions wrong? Even though you know they can read grade level text, because we all know every reader brings different background knowledge to that text, or they might be stronger in one genre than another. So this slide kind of breaks down the 3rd grade reading diagnostic. So you'll see the first passage was realistic fiction and poem. So when I was walking around with some of you and you were really getting into the test, some of you noticed poetry was a little bit more challenging for your students. So when we reteach that standard, we really want to bring in poetry. Okay, we have fables, informational texts. So you really want to look at the genre of the text, and then not just the genre, read the passage and determine what type of background knowledge. They can answer all the questions from that passage without any background knowledge, but that might, if they know more about science, that might help them read the text a little bit. Do they have to make more inferences from that text? Are the qualitative factors more challenging? And then the other thing you want to look at is stamina. What do you notice with the percentage of overall questions on the 3rd grade assessment? Passage 4, and I leave editing tasks separate because that one they don't have to read as long of a text, right? But look what happens here at passage 4. We're down to 45.43% of the students are getting most of those questions right. Now, data doesn't give us answers, it prompts questions. So is that because seeing stars in astronomy was more challenging, it was a more complex text for our students? Is it because they're running out of stamina and they're not able to read at the end and answer all the questions? Is it that those are too informational texts? So these are all questions to really dig deep in with your teachers and really have them be able to provide some input on why do they think that specific question, not just the standard itself, might have not been as strong for your students. What opportunities do we have there to really then focus in and reteach? And now I'm going to turn it over to Mickey for math.
All right, good morning, everybody. Paula's going to put up the 5th grade math diagnostic for me, and I'm going to go over 2 different items. One of them is a multiple choice, and the other one is a grid item. And the first one I would like for you to look at is question number 21 on the math diagnostic for me. Paula, please. 5th grade. Number 21 first. So the key to looking at the item analysis and the items in particular is that you're going to diagnose, right? This is a diagnostic. So based on what answer choices that the students selected, we can then prescribe remediation based on that. Okay, so as you can see, 20.7% of the students got this question right. And if you were to look at the DOK level for this item, this is a DOK 3 item, okay? So This is one where the students have to actually reason about multiplying with fractions. So if the students chose answer choice A, then they don't know how to multiply fractions correctly. So I'm going to base my remediation on prescribing those types of resources for my students. If my students chose C or D, then they're not understanding the big picture of what happens when you multiply fractions. So that's going to prescribe a different course of action. Now, Paula, can you go to question number 22? Okay, this is another item. 31% of the students got it correctly. So as we know, our gridded items, our students have to solve and find an answer. And not only that, they also have to grid it correctly. So there's a couple pieces here. When we look at our data, one thing that you might guide your conversations at your school is what are some of the common errors that your students are making. In this case, the students had to divide to be able to find an answer. But if they multiplied, that's going to prescribe a different course of action. Or if your students added or subtracted, did some other wrong operation, or if they divided and got an incorrect answer. So the key is to really hone in and see where are my students making mistakes and let that drive the conversation further.
Mickey, principals, I want to just take a minute to illustrate a point. Over the last 2 summers, we've taken some of our departmental budget and paid teachers under the leadership of Carla Kendall and Christine Gainwell to make sure that on every diagnostic item, every item has a distractor rationale. So when we start talking about having, these cognitive conversations and reasoning, like having them defend an answer choice, even if it's done in small group, there's a lot of different ways to do that. So every item on each of the diagnostics in the student item analysis has a distractor rationale.
Okay, and now I'll pass it off to Tom, who's going to talk about science.
Morning, everyone. I'm just going to dive into one of the questions in 5th grade that has definitely been taught at the time of the diagnostic. Now, we all know that grade 3 and grade 4 benchmarks, our fair game benchmarks, is something that they should have mastered in grade 3 and grade 4. And the scores are so low in our grade 3 and grade 4 standards that that's a matter of them seeing that content again and getting retaught or reviewed in 5th grade. The reason I chose this question is because this is a question that all of your teachers or your students should have mastered by the time the diagnostic was given. So this is a concept that has been taught, and in 5th grade we're at 45% correct, and so that we're below 50%. So I want to take a look at this question. And the reason I chose this question is because there's I don't want to call it a misconception, but you'll often hear that language arts is the boat that all other content floats, right, when it comes to the assessment. And we tend to tell ourselves that, if they can't read, they can't do science tests. However, in science in 5th grade, we focus particularly on, for our struggling readers, strategies. So a student finds a way and uses strategies to focus on the science of the question and pulling out, and so they can have a chance at being successful. If they know their science and they apply these strategies, that they can be successful on the test. And we have proven that using that strategy is very helpful. So if you look at this question, it has a lot of reading, but we teach them find the question that the student needs to focus on. What is it that the student needs to read? And it says, at the end of that question, all that information, it is science vocabulary rich, but at the end it says, they each have different ideas for separating the solution. Which student chose the best method? Literally, that's if the student is getting their science instruction and content, that's the part of the question they need to focus on. And our students can find success there. So if you look at this question and the samples, if you want to, on the data, can you hit on the distractor button for me? In the side, please. I think it's question 22. Oh, sorry. Go down. Science Elementary, and there we go. So while she's pulling that up, I want you to think about this too. We're all good readers, right? We're all educated. But if I brought in a physics book, a college-level physics book, and I put it in front of you and told you to read a chapter and then explain it to me, you'd have a hard time doing that because there's going to be vocabulary, and you didn't have the experience. You didn't have the instruction. So just reading the paragraph, there's a lot of terminology and vocabulary that you were not exposed to or experienced. So think of our 5th grade students as experienced in this. So they struggle with reading. Let's say they struggle with reading, 1. But if they haven't gotten the science content or the concept delivered to them in a way that they can understand it and the vocabulary exposed to them, and they haven't done the hands-on, they stand no chance at getting that question correct. Because it's like me dropping a physics book in front of you and saying, tell me what this is all about. All right, so yes, reading is an essential part of success on the test, but we also have to know that, do you have the data, the graph on 22, right? Sorry, I'll show you where the distractor graph. Yeah. Sorry. And then scroll up. All right, so actually I was looking for the other graph where it has all the questions. And so, but the bottom line is, when we look at the content on this and we look at that question, the students, they're looking at solution. Yeah, you can go back to the question because I wanted to show all the... They either get it right or they got it wrong, right? And in this question, it's dealing with solutions and separating solutions. So if you see on all the answer choices, you have filter, beaker, funnel, and stirring. It's tough for students to read about science tools, right? And how they use science tools. That is something that they need to experience in a hands-on setting. And I don't expect the expectation to be that everybody has to, in your small group work or your science stations, that there has to be hands-on going in every one. But in grades 3, grade 4, and grade 5, we can get more effective in maybe doing more modeled hands-on. So one of your stations is teacher-oriented, and those kids see that concept, and it's modeled for them. So they're overcoming their reading struggles because they've also have and are empowered with an experience in that concept. Because it's very tough to read about how do we separate a solution. And unless they see how we separate certain mixtures in science and they experience it, they're going to have a real hard time with this question. And the distractor here is A. The real one that they all chose is Alex ran it through a filter, because guess what? Filters is something that they know common. They can separate a solid and a liquid using filters. It's something that they are more familiar with. So they tend to go, they read the question, they're like, that definitely is used for separating mixtures, a filter. But this is specific to solutions, and you can't separate a solution using a filter, right? There's a special way to separate this special type of mixture. And unless they've had that experience in the classroom, or at least saw it in some way modeled for them, this question is going to be very hard for them to answer. On top of their reading challenge, it's the exposure to hands-on experiences in science. And if we don't find a way to show them these concepts, especially the ones they're struggling with in 5th grade that have been taught, they're going to struggle with this on the SSA. So this is what I would say. I would say find these questions, use that distractor tool, find out what it is about that question, and then target that within review and reteach and small group instruction through hands-on experiences, because that's where we're going to get to our level of mastery that they need. So that's passing it back on. Thanks.
So let's just take this moment. We kind of really were diving deep into the different assessments. So there are a lot of different questions that were being raised. So can we take a moment to see, do you have questions that you want to bring out for the good of the group? Things that came up that you want to ask at this point? And we have different people coming around with microphones right now. And we have one right here.
Diana, okay. I was looking at that report from Joe with the writing compared to the breakdown of it. And you said something, if they scored higher than a 7 on the writing, statistically they should have a level 3 or higher on the, switching mics on, am I good now?
Yes.
On the FSA score. But I looked at mine, and 47% of my students scored, who scored a higher than a 7 on the writing, were a 1 or 2 on the FSA. So where can I target that? Like, what could I target
you
there?
have. So we were coming over here, and Mr. Sabatino grabbed me to talk about his particular scores. So we were looking at those particular ones. On average, in our school district, students that scored on average a 7 on the writing also scored a level 3. But we also know that we have some students that scored above a 7 and were scoring a level 1 or a 2. I can tell you right now, all of you in your buildings, you're going to have a few of those right now too. They scored above a 7, but they're not going to be quite at a level 3. Here's the trick. If they're scoring an 8 on that test, they can read. On that writing test, they can read. Because we can show you lots of tricks around structure, but if you're getting to a 3 on the evidence and elaboration, you can read. So if they're getting still a level 2, that means they did not do well on the reading section of the FSA. Get into your reporting category data and figure out why, because they can read. Was it the grammar section that they struggled with? Was it a particular type of text set? Get in there to kind of really work around that and figure out what it was. Because those are readers, so that's something you should be able to identify and figure out. Kristen.
I just wanted to add something too. When you get that report, it's a Google Sheet. There's 2 tabs at the bottom. The first tab, you don't even want to look at it. There's no correlation with the students' names and the scores across those rows. That's just where Joe pulled data to populate from Unify and EDW, because he had to get it from 2 separate platforms. You want to look at the second tab, because if you look across that first tab, you're going to see students getting a 5 and then a 1 in ELA. So it's not accurate across. It's the first 2 columns came from EDW, the next 2 columns came from Unify. The students that came from Unify, their student names aren't there. So just don't look at the first tab because it gets confusing. You want to look at the second tab.
Good point. All right. Next question. Any other questions? All right, we have another one. No? Okay. Moving on to section 5, which has to do with reteaching. Yes, we do have a question.
Question over here, and I asked Lisa if we can share it for the good of the group. So again, that raw data tab, you can't look across. So Lisa said, well, where can we look and see how our 5th graders from last year individually did on PFO, evidence and elaboration, and conventions? That EDW report that was at section 1, and I know there's been a lot of reports, the link is there. It's like R0 something. Thank you. The first part is all the reporting categories for reading. Scroll all the way down to the right, and you'll have your students, your current 5th graders, how they scored in PFO, evidence and elaboration, and conventions from last year.
And the number for that again, Paula, is 620?
0620.
0620. That's a conversation that comes up a lot with teachers. They don't realize they can see their students' PFO, EE, and convention scores from last year. Although we can't see the essays, which would be lovely, I wish we could, but still knowing strengths and weaknesses and opportunities for growth by being able to see those particular category scores for the essays can be really helpful with honing in on where we need to focus instruction. So you want to be able to know that you can see that particular data set. And we have another question. Yes.
Diana, can you go over one more time? What makes a 0? And then how important it is to move that 0 to a 4, and what might you do with the student that scores around that area?
Okay, well, what makes a 0? In order to be unscorable in the writing, which is a 0, you have to, the paper has to be blank. You know, you don't write. It's a 0. You write completely in a foreign language, completely, no English on the page. Okay, because if it's some English, some a foreign language, they'll score the English part. So completely in a foreign language. You have a student, this is typically secondary kids, but occasionally elementary kid. You will have a student that tells you exactly what to do with your essay and how to do it in very colorful language. It happens. That is unscorable. Yeah, gotta love it. Or the last one, which is actually the biggest reason, which is why we had the biggest uptick in zeros, is it's completely 100% plagiarized. And by that, I do not mean they took out a section and didn't cite it. I mean every single solitary word on the page comes from the text. And sometimes they actually even cite it. They'll say, according to text 2, and then they copy text 2. So they cite it for you, but then they just copy it. There's no original thought. Sometimes they will include the transitions. They'll say first, copy, second, copy. So there's some words, but there's no original thought. That's a straight 0. You know what they did wrong. There is a code on your score reports that will tell you why they scored a 0. It's a code. Look at why. But those zeros are valuable. If the kid scored a 0 because they just didn't do it, that's a motivation issue. If they scored a 0 because they didn't have the English at the time, kids learn a lot of English during their first year of learning language. If it's because of the fact they straight copied, that's a learning moment. Make sure they understand what that means. But picking up even a few points could potentially have a very large impact on learning gains. Look at the difference it makes when you move a 0 to a 4. Now, if that same kid did really well on reading the previous year and bombs the reading the next year, you're not going to see a difference. So, I mean, all other things being equal, it's going to have an impact. It's tremendous the difference writing makes. Anybody else? All right. So reteaching points. Now with your teachers, if you were modeling this process and working with teachers through this process, once they've gone through the assessment, they've delved deeply. They've looked at the standards. They figured out what went wrong. Was it a standard issue, a reporting category issue, a particular skill within a standards issue? Now what? Because frankly, who cares what the problem is if nobody's going to do anything about it? Now what? Now we have to fix it. Now it comes the reteaching part, right? And it's important to reteach from point of error. Frankly, we don't have enough time in the day to reteach from the very beginning. At what point did the student make the error? And then that's the point where we start reteaching. It's reteaching from point of error. Where did you mess it up? That's where I have to pick it up from and keep going. It's also reteaching in small groups. Not all your kids messed up in the same place, and not all of your kids messed up at the same point of error. So you got to figure all that part out. Providing students with an exemplar, making sure they know what it's supposed to look like. Teaching to the appropriate depth of knowledge, and I know Mark covered that. But if the test is going to test up here, but all the questions you're asking in the classroom are down here, it's not going to cut it. And then we have to actually reassess for mastery. Here is an interesting slide you can work through with teachers. I know several of you kind of pulled me aside and you like the way that we color-coded that particular standard to break down the ELA standard and color-coded. I wish we had lots of those. That was a brainstorm that came very late last night, so I wish we had lots of them. That was our only example as of this moment, so those something we can work on. I'm glad people were finding that helpful. This is another way, though, you can break it down. So if you take the standard up top, this is a different one. It's a third grade standard, 1.2, same standard, just different grade level. 1.2, you break it down into either recounting stories or determining the central message. And if I recount stories, there are two really skills you have to have in recounting stories. You have to determine importance, because one of the ways that kids struggle with recounting stories is They just want to tell you every single solitary thing that happened. And in recounting stories, you have to figure out what are the important parts, right? Determining importance and then being able to summarize it quickly. Those are the two skills needed there. And in here, determining central message, lesson, or moral and explaining how it's conveyed. There are 3 skills that's needed there. You have to infer, because a lot of times it's not directly stated. You need to be able to synthesize information from all parts of the text and then analyze it. So again, where is the point of error for the kid? When they messed up that standard in that question, they didn't mess up 1.2. Where did they mess up? Did they mess up at the point of recounting? Did they mess up at the point of summarizing, of inferring, of synthesizing, or analyzing? Because it's not till you figure out that point of error until you figure out how to reteach. Because you can reteach recounting all day long, and then you go to reassess it, and the kid bombs again was because he was messing up over at analyzing. So that's the point where you kind of really have to hone in on where is point of error. Use the wrong answer. This is where those distractor analysis that Mark showed you really help, right? Besides the fact they're really cool, here's where they help you figure out the point of error. If you figure out what was the wrong answer the kid picked, it tells you the point of error, especially in science and math. These work really well for science and math. They're there for ELA too. They just don't hone in because there's so many parts of ELA. They don't hone in as well. But these tell you where the kid messed up. So for this one, B was the correct answer. And this was the same one Mickey went through earlier. But if the kid picked A, it tells you that the kid wasn't multiplying fractions correctly. So then that's a particular lesson you need to hone in on. By the way, those are hyperlinks, so you can hit some, if that particular question was an issue for you, those are some reteach lessons you can, those are hyperlinked for you. If the kid was doing C or D, they weren't recognizing that the product of the fractions will always be less than both factors. Right there. Then that's the lesson they need to work in on. So you can figure out point of error by looking to see exactly what did the kid select. Or writing is another place you can do small group. Easiest way to do it is to go from left to right using the rubric. Focus in on PFO first. Shore up your purpose-focused organization. Couple of pieces to keep in mind with this. The rubric was written to follow, it came out at the same time that the state was moving its evaluation system to Marzano or Danielson. So the rubric was designed to look much like the scales that Marzano and Danielson use, which means a 3 is grade level, 4 is above grade level. If you look at the words in the rubric, the 3 pulls language from the standards, just like the scales are due. Same concept, exact same concept. 3 is grade level, 4 is above grade level. Sometimes you hear your teachers want to shoot for the 4 in a particular category. That is a great goal, all about shooting for above grade level, right? But when I'm working with struggling students, I have to go for on grade level first. Okay? So if I'm shooting for the PFO score, you want to go for the 3 in PFO. I want to move towards that 3. Once I have the 3, then I move over to EE, and I move towards the 3. And then I pick up to the 2 in conventions. The conventions is the last one I focused on. I focus on my PFO, I focus on my EE, with the goal of getting to the 3. 3 is grade level. If it's a struggling student, and that means that's where you're struggling to get to, is the on grade level, to the 3. All right, and that's done in small group work. Depth of knowledge. So you focus in on recall, level 2, application of skills and concepts, and then level 3, strategic thinking, complex reasoning, and I want you to look at this. Look at your grade 3 mathematics. Look at how many standards you have in at that level 2 range. Knowing that when we teach those standards, those are the level questions I should be asking. How many standards are your grade 3? Or I'm sorry, level 3 range. And then look at ELA. Now, some of these are writing, but look how many are RI and RL. And those are just taught at the DOK 3. Tested at DOK 3. 3rd grade. So making sure when teachers are working with kids, right, that that's where we are. That's the work that we're doing in classrooms. Because Mark said it, and he said it, and right, that's it. That's the message. If the assessment, if the blueprint is showing that here's where they're going to ask the kids questions, but all the work we're doing in the classroom is here, then all that hard work that we're putting in is not going to yield the results that we think it's going to yield. And that's going to be the struggle. And then that's when you get your results back at the end and you don't understand it because you feel like everyone was working so hard, what happened? And then that could be the why. So we want to make sure we really hit that part. All right, so with your school team, I want you to take a couple minutes. Think about the materials we reviewed about point of error, depth of knowledge, small group work. What are some aha moments you had about either the activity that you worked through, the test you worked through, the student item analysis report, any of that you studied in the previous section? What are some moments that you had that you maybe hadn't previously thought about, some moments of aha you had about your reporting, any things that you thought about that you really want to take back? Take a couple of minutes. Or people at your table, I'm sorry, if you moved away from your school group, people at your table. right, 20 seconds and we'll come back. And does anyone have anything they wish to share? An aha moment they feel that they want to share with the group? All right, I'm going to ask you all to put your hands down because we just don't have the time to share that many of them. So we'll move on. All right, I do truly recommend that you utilize the PowerPoint because I'm just going to highlight for you a few resources, but we hid easily 30 slides that contain resources, so you won't see them when we review the PowerPoint, but they're there. All of the slides contain hyperlinks, so when I say, oh, this leads to that, you don't have to go searching for it. They all have hyperlinks, so you can just click on anything, so they're there. All right, I really, truly recommend you kind of get into the PowerPoint because we're not going to show you everything. But here are some elementary literacy resources, some diagnostic stuff, some comparative diagnostic charts, all which give you great data. The beauty of all the data charts I'm going to show you is they all go straight to Unify, and they're all tagged to your particular sign-on. Which means if you click it, you see your students, your teachers can click this, they see their students. So it works beautifully that way. And then here on the bottom is a video for analyzing that data so you can share that with your teachers so they can see how they can look at their own particular diagnostic data. Bottom of the screen, hyperlinked video. PD, there are a ton of different videos on this particular PD page. What we did was we kind of highlighted a few of them. Right now we're getting asked a ton of questions, as you saw today, about the writing test, not surprisingly, since that's coming up so fast and furious. So we have a video there just about understanding the FSA writing test so they can watch the quick video. And then also one about how you pick small groups, that's there. We have some here, although I know a lot of teachers already use the iReady toolkit, not everyone does. So in case you know you have some teachers that may want to do it, but maybe they're tech phobes or not sure how to access it, quick video on exactly click by click how you can access the iReady toolkit and get to materials inside of it. There are a wealth of great resources for reteaching the different skills within the standards in the iReady toolkit. You have it provided for you right there, and that's a little video that you can share with your teachers so they can see exactly how to delve into the toolkit. And then here, there are about 3 different slides that hit all the standards. I'm just showing you one. But for every single standard that was on the ELA diagnostic that was taught prior to the diagnostic, you can click on the link and it will show you every FSQ or USA that assessed that particular standard so you can compare how your students did on that particular standard across the year. So you can see whether or not there's been progress or not throughout the year. Everyone, there are 3 pages worth. I'm only showing you one. The other 2 pages are hidden. For reading intervention, anything with the box is hyperlinked. I really strongly recommend the one about determining a target and picking a strategic intervention. How do you look at point of error and determine what to do? I get asked a lot about I need more pieces of text. There aren't enough pieces of text to do around reading. There are some social studies paired passages, social studies topics. I can weave in a little social studies, but all about it, you can hit both your social studies standards and your ELA standards, all hyperlinked in there, get you right to the spot there, okay? including your building blocks for history labs. And then we have social studies and ELA paired passages that we've built out for 5th grade. We hope to build out more for 3 and 4 by next year, but at least you have some 5th grade ones there. And they're all OERs, open educational resources, so they're free for you. And there we have some ones for our ELL students, different tools, again, all direct linked. For mathematics, because we talked about making sure you hit the appropriate level of DOK, there you have all of your tools for getting to the appropriate level of DOK with mathematics, since I know for that part of the room, that's where you said your area of concern was. There you go by grade level. Videos, PD resources, direct links to your videos that you can work with your teachers. Same thing that I said for ELA, you have it for math. There are multiple sheets. There's just one of them. Connects to all the standards taught prior to diagnostic. And then you have separated out by grade level and again by AMP, because that's slightly different. And then for science, all your baseball card data. And then all of your resources hyperlinked. All right, so I want to tease you a little bit with one more tool, and then we have another brief activity for you. Reading recovery. Quick show of hands. How many of you remember reading recovery when we've had this in our district previously? All right, ooh, good, a fair number of you. That's a positive. All right, well, we are actually, I don't want to say piloting because it's not a pilot, we've done it before, but we've actually brought reading recovery back, and we are doing it right now in one school in our district, so it's one school right now this year in our district. We are doing reading recovery, and it's a short-term intervention meant to bring kids, first graders, first grade only, meant to bring kids onto grade level, so that way they're not struggling in later years. It's highly effective, lots of great research behind it. Again, there are some hidden slides on reading recovery inside the PowerPoint. You have access to the PowerPoint. And I want you to show you one student. This is student A, real student in our district that we're working with in the reading recovery program here in one of our schools in Palm Beach County. A first grader, right? So at the beginning of the year, he was reading at a level B, okay? He had a self-correction rate of 1 out of every 11 words. You can see out of the different categories, he was struggling. Staying on key is at the bottom right, so 1 to 3 is in the low range, 4 to 6 in the average range, 7 to 10 is in the high range. He was at a B, right? After 19.5 hours, 39 lessons, right? Here's now where he's reading at a JK. At that time of year, on grade level is a GH. He went from a B to a JK in a matter of a few months, okay, for reading recovery. Now, what we are doing is, those were his exit scores. In August, out in December, out back in the regular classroom, another kid coming in. And it's not that it's only one kid at a time, that's just one example. All right, and so there's a cycle, a group of kids, so that's one kid that was cycled in, cycled out, another kid came in, constant cycle in. Let me, what? No, they're pulled out during a separate time. So they're not losing reading block time. First grade. That was B. That's a level B book. That's what he was reading in August. That's what he's reading when he leaves. Because the letters are lovely, but when you see the text, talk about a difference. Here's why I'm teasing you with that. The ability to train these teachers and pay for the teachers to train them is an incredibly expensive process. We were able to work with various grants, and we have the opportunity to pull in 12 more teachers for next school year. So we are just going to have an awareness session via an Adobe Connect. You don't have to leave your schools, buildings, 2 different time periods. There's a link. It's in the PowerPoint. It's a live link. in the PowerPoint. If you just want to hear about it, it's not a commitment. I just want to hear, I want to bring my teachers in, an AP and an SSCC, a whomever, to listen to it. I want to hear a little bit more and have a conversation. You can join in one of those sessions. Now, you may listen to the session and go, you know what? I'm just not going to do it right now. That's great. You just want to hear. It's there. If you hear and you go, all right, I'm interested, I want to know more, we're going to have some breakout sessions during the March PLA. Come to one of the breakout sessions. That's not a commitment either. You may come to the March breakout session and go, I changed my mind, not for me, and that's okay. All right, you're opting into it if you wish to do it. We have spots for 12 teachers, and that's it. So I anticipate that we'll go quickly because those of you that know reading recovery know how powerful it is. So I'm certainly not making anyone do it because I anticipate those 12 spots will go incredibly fast. So 2 awareness sessions and then breakout session during March. The rest of the information is in the PowerPoint. Now, yes. I will answer all further questions during the Adobe Connects. If you go to the activity sheet, which is called the awareness activity sheet that you started to fill out, it was 2 pages stapled together. You already filled out the first page. It is called the assessment analysis activity. You filled out the very first page already. The assessment awareness activity, you filled out the very first page already. If you flip, there's a second page. Now what we're going to have you do is talk, and the value in this is, although it's sometimes difficult, you're so busy running on campus to talk with the people at your own school site, it's equally valuable to have the opportunity to talk with people at a different school site. So take this opportunity, talk with the people at your table, especially those that are at a different site, to see what are some of their answers to these 3 questions. What is it that they're going to do? What is it that they're going to ask their teachers to do? And what is it that they're going to expect their students to do in response to the data and the information you've gathered here today? Take a few minutes to talk about the answers to those questions.
If you have a question, if you feel like you still have a question about anything, you can go back to the Mentimeter and submit a question. It won't show your name. So if you feel like you still have a question that you want answered before you leave, go back to the poll, menti.com, and submit a question. Okay, we'll follow up with those. Yeah, will you make sure everybody's got mics so we can share out? Okay, if I can have your attention, please. So a couple of things as we close out. Obviously, what you were provided today with is an opportunity to have a conversation with your teams about, data-driven instruction and how you respond to different assessments. You may still have a technical question or any kind of question you can submit through the poll, or obviously email anybody on the team. I'm going to just put up on the screen really quickly a couple of things that were in the handout folder. Okay, so you've seen most of this. The document that I'm pulling up now is called Assessment, Analysis, and Action Plan Template. And this was modeled after the Principal Autonomy Pilot. And this is just trying to give you guys a sample tool that you could use or modify or develop, because how are teachers having this conversation either in their PLCs or structured time in a faculty meeting, whatever it is, right? We talk about having systems, right? And so if this doesn't work for you, develop your own, right? But it's a way to ensure that we're asking questions, maybe recording that question somewhere and responding to the data. And then there is also I will call it like a starter. This document came from the retreat or the conference that the team went to, and it's called Pre-Work for Data-Driven Analysis, Setting Up Effective Meetings. And this kind of walks you through chronologically before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting. So when you're setting up systems with your instructional leadership team and how you're engaging the teachers, it gives you, if you will, a protocol. It's a way to have systems, right? I was speaking with one principal earlier. They're, kind of new early on at the school, and there's not evidence of systems, right? And so how do we ensure that these things are scheduled, that they're happening, and that they're consistent? Those things are obviously important. Finally, when you look at the slide deck, you'll see on these slides, and I know the people in the back can't see me right now, where there is like an eyeball with a strike through, right? That just means those slides are hidden. One thing that you might consider doing is, Now, all these slides have hyperlinks in them, right? If you download it as a PowerPoint and then make it your own, all the hyperlinks are still there, right? So then you can unhide the slides that you want and share them, right? However you share things with your team. But printing them out immediately loses the value of them being hyperlinked. It seems rather obvious, but just kind of thought I would state that, right? So we've got mics around the room. We're just going to give you an opportunity to give us feedback, share out, an aha moment, a lesson learned, anything that you would like to give us as a team feedback on the activity or the day.
I just want to say all of this is great, and I think for some of us, a lot of this is okay, I'm doing the right thing moment, right? Because we've already been doing a lot of this work, and a lot of reminders in it of different places you can click to make it look different, right? So I've been sitting and doing one-on-one data chats, but I've been using a different report that gives the same information. But this just gives you a different way to look at it with the teachers. I know for me, my aha has been, okay, I'm doing all this, but just today getting time to dig in myself into the grade level I'm worried about, I now already have an action plan for 3 teachers that I'm planning to go back and put into place. So if we've done the big work here, then thinking about our individuals using those forms to have discussions about what their action plans are.
Thank you. We did get feedback on the timing, right? So one of the things, I'm not telling you anything new, right, is during the window, the data is there, right? The reports are populating. You're just waiting for a week after the window to get the predicted levels. But the instructional value is there immediately or close to immediately after the student's tested. So if you have a teacher, right, who's testing early in the window or a group of kids, then the information is there for the taking at that time, right? You don't have to wait until you get predicted levels. You know, that can just be another data point later on, but the reteaching opportunities are there immediately. All right. Well, yes, Adam?
I have an aha and a lesson learned. If you did borrow a Chromebook from us this morning, please, Mike and Bill and I will be over in that corner. Please bring it back. We did scan your eyeball when you did borrow it, just so you know. We will find you. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Have a great day. Thank you so much.